Creativity is just your ability as a human to come up with ideas and then put them into action.
You have this ability to make phenomenal pictures and to show people how amazing they are as people. That is the gift, and it's pretty special.
For a lot of us, we just aim too low with those intentions. We say, I want to travel, or I want to make X amount of money. And those things are usually pretty attainable to some point. And once we get there, what happens next?
One of the most liberating things as an artist is to remind yourself that you don't have to please everybody. Once you give yourself permission to not have to please everybody, then you can start creating without fear.
With basically anything, there's the art of it, and then there's the business side of it, the logistics of it, the structure of it.
Your excitement is like a compass, and it points you in a certain direction. And when you walk or run in that direction, life seems to just align itself.
Hello, creatives, and welcome back to the ARC Creative Podcast. This podcast is all about digging into the minds of creatives, understanding their stories, digging into their creativity, and learning a little bit more about what motivates and inspires them to create so that we can take action to create ourselves. We hope to inspire you to become better artists and entrepreneurs by learning from the best in the arts and business. I am your host, Sachin Kona, a wedding and portrait photographer and event organizer, and I really appreciate you for tuning in and joining us. This episode is with Joam Guedes. We talk about all the different countries that he's lived in, how movies have inspired him. We talk about storyboarding, some of the gear that Joam uses and its processes, and we touch upon a bit of his experiences last year at The Experience. This was a really fun conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Joam Guedes. This podcast is sponsored by The Experience. The Experience is a 3-day photography conference and workshop happening on the 23rd to the 25th of October in Vancouver, BC. 10 creatives are going to join us from all over the world, and we have a bonus day of masterclasses, which is on the 22nd of October, in which all of our 10 keynote speakers will be teaching you hands-on in intimate settings so that you can expand your photography business and career. The Experience is for all types of photographers and creatives, from wedding, portrait, commercial, fashion, and fine art communities. The theme is the art and business of photography, and if you want to raise the bar for yourself, learn from the best of the best, and be a part of a growing supportive community, then we want to see you there. Listeners to the show can save $100 on the ticket price using the code podcast at checkout. Just head to www.experience.thisisarc.co for more information. Welcome to the show, Joam.
Hey man, so glad to be here. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Great to have you here, brother. This is actually the second time we've spoken. I want to be completely upfront. When I first started this podcast, I reached out to about 3 or 4 friends and did like practice 10, 15-minute episodes. And you were kind enough to give me your time then, and I really appreciate it. But this now is the real deal. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, man. And actually, it was really helpful to be to have done it the first time. You know, like now I'm a lot less nervous.
Okay, that's great.
I think I'm a little bit more ready for that. So yeah, totally comfortable now, man. The first time I was probably like sweating, and I was actually I think I was cold that day. I was like sick, or I got a cold or something, that day. So it didn't sound good.
It's all good, man. Well, thanks for guiding me and helping me on this journey into podcasting. I want to jump straight into a question, and I know you absolutely love movies. So if you could have had a part in any movie, whether that's starring, directing, producing, helping with the art direction, which movie would that have been?
Oh, wow. That would be like, I would probably have a list of movies, right? But I think I think I can, there are like few movies that are so emblematic, right? There is a movie from a Canadian director, Denis Villeneuve. He's kind of really popular right now. He directed the newest Blade Runner. He directed Arrival. But there is a movie that it's really intense, man. The story itself is gorgeous and very sad, but also kind of like full of like hope, and it's called Incendies. I don't think there is an English version for the name, and it's filmed in Montreal and I think in Iran. And the movie is just like stunning. Like everything in the movie is just beautiful. I wish I did anything there. Like even like like holding like light stands, I would be just happy to be there, and then just see how he works, because his method is just so perfected. It's really impressive how he directs actors and how he explores emotions, and how he transforms the screenplay in such a masterpiece, right? So it would be amazing to be part of it.
Fantastic, that's great. And so you touched a little bit upon the roles. Is the director role something that you'd mostly want to be a part of, or to assist the director?
I don't think so. I think maybe, I think being a director, it's a massive role, right? It's so much responsibility to take on. I don't think I would have the skills to manage everything. I would probably be micromanaging stuff that I shouldn't be doing. And also like forgetting stuff that also was probably important, right? But I think like working anything with cinematography, or photography in movies, would be a dream for sure. It's very technical, very slow. It's also I relate a lot to that in my process. The way I shoot, pretty much very like slow, and I take my time, kind of creating my scenes. I think we're going to probably talk about it later.
Yeah, definitely. I'm definitely going to jump into that, more about your process for sure.
Yeah.
Another question I had was, I know you've lived in many places, as we touched upon the intro, Spain, Denmark. Obviously, you're from Brazil. You lived in Montreal, and now you're in Vancouver. If you could live in any other city in the world outside of the ones that you've already been a part of, where would you move to and why?
Wow, that's also a good question. I think there are a few cities that I would probably love to live, right? I probably already lived in one of the cities that I really wanted to, which is Barcelona. I lived there for a year, and it was just amazing. And it is everything that people tell you about Barcelona. I think I would love to live in Japan, man. I would love to probably live in Tokyo for a year.
Yeah, have you been to Tokyo?
Never been, man. But I just have this impression of this Japanese culture. Being from Brazil, we have lots of Japanese immigrants who brought part of their culture to Brazil, and they contributed so much to the Brazilian culture, and lifestyle. And I have so many Japanese descendant friends, and I think I was always passionate. I was always I always thought that I had this ideal imagery of Japan. I think Tokyo is this crazy multicultural hub that also embraces strongly the Japanese culture. So yeah, I would love to be there.
Beautiful. Yeah, I was actually in Japan in April of this year, and I had such big dreams about going to Tokyo, and that was definitely fulfilled. But Osaka was a city that I really loved when I was there. We only spent a day in Osaka, but if you ever make it out to Japan, which I'm sure you will, definitely check out Osaka. It was awesome.
And how different it is from like Osaka to Tokyo, man.
It just looked a bit more refreshed. It was a lot of beautiful architecture, a lot cleaner, a lot more space, less people, but still had that vibrancy and funk that Tokyo has, but on like kind of a smaller scale. So it's like, I used to live in London, and it's such a beautiful big city, and there's lots of stuff happening, but I like the scale of Vancouver because it's smaller and you can just really get into things, whereas sometimes in London I felt like overwhelmed. So that's probably why Osaka really stuck out for me.
Yeah, I think I'll probably like it too. Like I like the smaller scale, although I think Tokyo would be just amazing as an experience. Yeah. I don't feel like I could live in a 35 million people city, for the rest of my life. But yeah, Osaka sounds great, man. I'll be there for sure.
Yeah. So how many languages do you speak? Because obviously Spain, Denmark, Brazil, Canada.
Well, so I mean, fluently, I would say, comfortably, I can speak Portuguese, Spanish, and English with all like its limitations, right?
Sure.
I learned a bit of Danish when I lived there. I was able to kind of get around. I remember I was in job interviews that I did in Danish. Also in English as well. And I speak a bit of French, although I think I understand it better than I speak. And I think I find like the Quebecois, like the Canadian French.
Yeah.
It's harder to understand, and it's a little harder to learn in terms of pronunciation. So I think if I lived in France, I would have a better time learning or kind of getting around with my French.
Sure. Okay, awesome. So with living in all these different countries and all these different places, any key lessons that you learned about yourself from being in all these different spots?
I think it's a kind of a cliche, man, but it's so true, right? I think all cliches are kind of true as well. But it's just that we are all the same, man. No matter where you are, like people are just people, right? And it's even though you feel like you're in different cultures, in the end, we're all very similar. We aspire very similar things. We dream of having a safe, stable life. We want something better for the future of our kids. And in all these places, of course, there are different priorities and different cultural perspective on certain things. But all in all, like we're all very similar, And the world, I think, because the world is so small nowadays and so globalized, I think people are getting more. I think their thoughts or even their cultures are becoming more mixed and more influenced by different cultures, and they have access to information from all over the world. So yeah, I think that's what I learned. It's also whenever you move to a different place, I think you've been there as well, right? You move from England to Canada. Puts things, especially whatever you think it is true or right, for all your life. When you move to some new place, you just learn that it puts things into perspective, right? Because people have different perspective on priorities, on on lifestyle, and you learn to adapt and you learn to take all these good things into your life, right? And also some of the not so good things as well.
Fair play. So, okay, so you started off in the advertising industry.
Yep.
And you worked for marketing agencies and advertising agencies in these different countries. How did you end up getting into these industries, and what led you to becoming a photographer?
When I was a kid in Brazil, I was always passionate about this communications world, right? Not only photography, movies, but also journalism. I think I dreamed, I wanted to be a journalist for a while. And then I remember I started taking photos right when I got into university, which was my major was in marketing and advertising. So marketing and advertising in Brazil was a new thing, especially in university. And I learned how to take photos right first, I bought my new camera and I started doing courses right in first year. And right away I thought I wanted to be a photographer, but that was 1998. And being a photographer in Brazil was just not something that was really easy. Like we didn't have access to gear. Film was extremely expensive. Developing was very limited. You would have to send it to major cities and still not totally reliable and also very expensive. I didn't live in a big city, so meaning I would probably have to invest a lot in gear, but not have the return in that investment with work. So it was really tricky. So I ended up doing throughout college. I started working in advertising agencies. And in the advertising world, I had so many friends and new people from that world, so it was a lot easier to get into that world. And then I left to do a master's in Spain in international marketing. I still don't know why I did it, because it had nothing to do with communications. And then when I went back to Brazil, it's just a long story short, I got married and my wife was moving to Denmark. At the time she was accepted in a master's degree there in Denmark, and that's when I kind of figured out that if I'm going to Denmark, probably I won't find a job in my area because I don't have much experience in international marketing. In advertising, I need to speak the language, so it's going to be tricky. So I started investing more time in photography again, and then with the transition at the time 2004 until 2006, the transition from film to digital was becoming more mainstream, digital photography. And then it was easier, cheaper, more affordable to buy gear. And then that's when I started again. So I started studying like stuff that I still don't know really well, like Photoshop, and learning how to understand digital files and digital photography. And that's when I came back to Brazil. It was just natural to start working in the advertising photography world. It just made sense to me. I knew the process. I knew I had already a network in that industry. I already had worked on the other end of the industry, which was like the client's end, or the advertising agency's end. So I kind of knew the processes. So it kind of made it easier for me, to get into that industry. Yeah, and that's how I ended up there.
Great. And so do you still do any work with any of these marketing or advertising agencies?
Oh, not anymore. I was, until I left Brazil, I was still trying to adjust my new kind of work that I do nowadays to the advertising world. So it was a long transition, and I think things were kind of catching up. I was starting to get like requests from brands who saw my work as something that could work with their work, right? So my style would probably work for their brands.
And are you talking about your style from the
diaries?
From the diaries?
Yeah.
Okay.
Diaries. Yeah, I'm sorry. So I think I was, at the time, I was starting to get like inquiries from like clothing brands, lingerie brands, smaller apparel brands from my area. So to do work, basically like the work that I do for the diaries in terms of like directing and this more cinematic approach to photography, they're into their like advertising campaigns. And I started doing that. It was working well, slowly, but well. And then I moved to Canada, so I had to kind of start over again, right? I didn't have any networking here.
Sure.
It's still a slow process, right? So I hope someday I can go back to that world. It would make sense to me since I kind of have already experienced and I know how it works. It doesn't change much, the advertising photography industry, right?
Great. And so you mentioned that your work is very cinematic. When I see it, I definitely see that within the way that you play with light and, the subjects that you're using. It's usually indoors and has this like beautiful warmth and vibrancy to it. Does your inspiration mostly come from movies?
Yeah, it does. I think my main source of inspiration is movies, right? It's been since I was a kid. I grew up like watching movies like regularly with my older brother. He knows everything, man, about movies. He's totally fanatic about movies and everything related to the movie industry. He knows all the directors' names and who they worked with, actors and cinematographers. I'm not that into all the details, but I really do. I feel totally inspired. So I think the way stories are told through movies, through cinematography, lighting, the storytelling, the screenplay, I think they're like really inspiring. And I always feel like not only connected to the imagery of movies, but also soundtrack, screenplay, the acting itself. So I think all the emotions that you see in movies, they're like so, they connect to me really, really deeply. Sometimes they feel really real. So I think my connections to movies, they're like a lot bigger than my connection to photography itself.
Beautiful. And how does that play into your personal work? How are you being inspired by one of the latest movies that you've seen and then bringing that into the diaries?
I think the way I see the photos that I take, I see them in individual scenes, right? So that I kind of make it from scratch. And they're totally inspired by movie scenes, they're not only portraits, but more individual scenes or like little stories told in one shot. So I think that's how movies really play a big role in influencing my work.
Awesome. And so can you tell us a bit about what the diaries is for anyone who hasn't seen your work? Obviously, highly recommend checking out, going to Joam's website and just having a look at it while we're having this conversation. But can you tell us a bit about what the diaries is and how you came to create this project of yours?
So the diaries, it's always hard to define, right, man? Because we have such an attachment to our work. Even like defining it for me would be like hard to do. But I think that I always try to tell that diaries is a portrait of women's intimate world or at least my perception of my view of it, right? So it's my own idea of that intimate world. And when I started diaries, I was going through this transition process that I think all artists, creative people go at some moments in their lives, that I was not happy with what I was doing because I was working with advertising, photography, but I was pretty successful, stable, but I was just clicking for other people because most of the work was created by art directors and creative directors and were presented to me, and I was just the problem solver. So I would probably just tell them stuff like, oh, we can do this, or if you want to go forward with this idea, we need a bigger budget, or this budget won't work for that, but we can produce this with that. So it was very technical and very practical, but not creative at all. So I was doing that for 8 years already and I'm not happy. And I was looking into doing more personal work and finding my own voice and finding what I really liked. So it took me a while. It was just a long process. And then I started thinking of like shooting intimate portraiture, which is what I do nowadays. And for me, it was never about beauty or shapes or forms or nudity itself. Actually, when I started shooting the diaries, there was no nudity at all. But I wanted to shoot more, to express myself. So the diaries for me, it was always a form of expression of that intimate world, a certain view that I have of the world that I kind of know nothing, right? I'm a man. So it was really created out of curiosity. And from that, I started to kind of build the ideas of not only showing that beauty for itself, but also showing emotions and trying to tell small stories through scenes. So for me, each and every scene of diaries are basically individual scenes that I kind of try to show a certain kind of emotion or an expression of that intimacy.
Fantastic. I'd love to talk to you a bit more about, I know obviously at the conference, you're going to be talking about a lot more about the diaries and personal work and what it means to you. But I want to talk a bit about storyboarding and creating moods. Can you give us a bit of an idea as to your process in storyboarding your next shoot or your last shoot?
So I think this is where it gets tricky. When I started doing the diaries, I used to do a lot more storyboarding than I do nowadays, and a lot more planning. And I'll tell you, it used to be very helpful in some ways, and it still is. I still do, but in a different level. Because when you do storyboarding and also like mood boards, they're very helpful because they guide you through a certain process, right? So you kind of have an idea of what you're going to shoot, but they also limit you to ideas that you already have, right? So it's normally a process where your brain sees those images and then it doesn't not necessarily try to recreate that, but it goes through the easy process of, okay, this works, or I like this, or this is beautiful because I saw something like this that is also beautiful, right? So that's why mood boards are helpful, because they kind of create shortcuts for you to get it to the final result. But they also stop you sometimes from being more creative and a little bit more expressive, because these photos that you have on mood boards, especially, they're like someone else's creation, right? And they're someone else's also expression, and not necessarily totally your expression. So in my process nowadays, I have some storyboarding done. So I think of spaces that I have in the location that I'm going to shoot. Imagine, for example, I'm shooting in a living room, have a sofa. Right now, I'm in my living room. So I have a sofa, I'm looking at the window. So if I have that mood, that storyboarding, so I probably imagine, or I'll write down that, okay, corner of that living room, sitting on the sofa, sitting on the sofa's arm, or using the table as a support, or crop this way so I can frame, like there's a frame in the corner. So if I know my location in advance, which I normally do, I'll have those written down. So when I get there, I don't get frustrated and confused, also kind of thinking over things. But I also let my creativity go a little bit more visceral throughout the shoot. So I kind of let myself feel afraid of not knowing during the shoot. It helps me a lot. It helps me kind of push myself into doing something different, and also not going through the easiest way, right? It doesn't always work, but it helps me, and I feel like that I'm being, whenever I do that, I feel like in the end that I was more creative than I expected.
Totally. And how do you create transitions between one frame to another when you're creating a story?
So yeah, that's a good point, man. I think it's a little bit of that planning, also art direction. So when you think of what you're shooting, let's say putting in context like what I do. So let's say we're shooting someone that, so they will probably bring their own lingerie, let's say in terms of styling, and we're shooting in a place that has, I don't know, some really darker tones, more moody, not really classic, but like a little bit like darker, vintage, I don't know. And then if you ask the person to bring some really casual pink lingerie, it won't really work, right? So you, first of all, you make a pre-selection of what will work for the place, basically giving the directions for the person to bring their own lingerie, or you bring in your own props. And then from that, you choose whatever's going to work for the location, and then you already think of those places that you're going to have them. So the continuity in that is that you, for example, imagine you're shooting in a sofa with a certain lingerie, then in the living room that has a different vibe, you have to choose something that works for the place, right? Or like something that is nude or not. So also, if the person is nude in one place, the person cannot be wearing a lingerie right next in the next shot in the same place. It won't make sense, right? So that's what I try to do when telling stories and also creating my storyboard, is that it needs to make sense. It's all adaptable throughout the shoot. It's not like written in stone or something.
Sure. Yeah. It's not written in stone. It's
yeah. But it's but yeah, for sure there's some flexibility, but there's some planning involved. There is like a kind of some variation in terms of moods. So for example, in my sessions there are some more casual shots, and then some like really intimate, moody shots where like there's a sense of loneliness or wistfulness. But also there are some more sensual photos where there's more like physical expression, a little bit more openness, a sense of desire. So I always try to explore those moods and kind of like play with like a, like a storytelling in a movie where the movie goes from like first act, where it's normally telling the story, and then a peak, where like there is like some emotions and fights and whatever, and like loving, and then the end, which all concludes, right? So for me, the shots are the same.
Wow. And when you're taking your photos, are you thinking ahead of time or with the subject about the sort of moods that you want to create? Is there something that they may have been experiencing or want to kind of share and bring to the table, so to speak, within the shoots?
No. I think this is one of the things that maybe I need to improve or not. I don't know. It's always a good question, man, because what I talk with the subjects in advance is about like the process, how they feel about the shoot, why are they choosing to shoot with me, what they see in my work, so what are they looking for, and then also I set my expectations for the shoot. So I kind of explain how I direct, what I expect from them, what I expect them to deliver to me throughout the shoot. And then when I get to the shoot, then I kind of meet the person, or like I kind of know how the person is feeling in front of the camera, in many cases, not wearing any clothes, or it's like partially undressed, then I can know how much I can take from the person, right?
Sure.
And in terms of emotions and expression. So in that case, it goes with the flow, and I respect a lot of who the person is in that shot. And I think that's what varies from one session to another in my work, is who the person is that some people are more open, some are shyer, they're more quiet or more talkative. So we probably see that in the photos as well.
Definitely. And so you curate who you shoot with very heavily, it seems. And it sounds like a lot of people are actually approaching you to be a part of your projects. Is that the case?
Well, I would say so. I'm not sure how much is a lot of people, but yeah, there's always people interested in working with me. I wouldn't say that I curate them in that sense that I pick them by hand, but I definitely have a bit of whenever someone contacts me, I normally kind of go through like a small process of asking some questions, or like really informal, but that really shows me how much people are interested in shooting with me because they see like the meaning of what it means to me, or see something in my work, or just because they want beautiful pictures. I'm not really interested. I mean, a client that works with me, that shoots with me, they want the images for themselves, right? So if it is a client that I'm shooting with, so there's more flexibility, of course, and I'm not going to like pick them, I'm not going to choose them. But if I'm doing that as personal work, I'm definitely shooting with someone that at least shows in some level that they see something in my work that they want to be part of, right? Not just more like a beautiful picture of themselves. So this means a lot to me, like really does. It's one of the most important things when it comes to like working with people, is that I really want to know that, that they're there like to be part of something.
Okay. And so I want to go back a bit to composition. Are there any mistakes that you commonly see within photographers that, well, not necessarily mistakes, but things that they could do to enhance their images by composing better? Because I feel from the movies that you watch and obviously looking at the work that you create, you're very intentional about how you compose and set up your scenes. So what could somebody listening take away for their next shoot and possibly enhance their images through better composition?
Well, I think one of the things let's talk about like people who are really consistent in their composition and pattern that you see more than what I see that is bad, right? I think it's kind of because it's easier for me to point out what works than what doesn't. But so I think when you see really good composition, it means that there are a few elements, right, in the photo. So I normally see these three things like in the photo, right? So imagine, especially in the kind of work that we do, like you and me. So you have normally the environment, which is the space that you're shooting at. Doesn't matter if it is in the woods, mountains, or inside a church. You have the environment, and then you have the lighting and the subject. So these are basically the three elements that you have, right? Doesn't matter how many elements you have in the photo. Those are the three components, right? The main components of the photo. So if there is an imbalance in one of those, then composition is not right. And so for me, lighting, people talk a lot about the way I see light, but that's because for me, lighting is such an important part of composition. It's not only the frame itself, because normally when you imagine composition, we think of the frame, right? How, like what kind of lens or how do I frame it? And like what is purposely or not in frame.
Yeah.
But the lighting itself is such an important part of composition, is how you paint the image, right? So how you create mood and how you hide and show stuff. Movies do that really, really well when they want to show emotion, expression, how they move camera, but also how they light things up, right? So in my opinion, lighting is such an important part of composition. Also, so taking care of lighting, and not just because there's a beautiful light that you saw somewhere or because there's a ray of light there. So this is a common shot, especially in wedding photography, which I love. I love it. It's like, for example, there's the bride, and then she's normally in a place where it's beautiful lighting. She's like either like getting ready or like in a church or somewhere, I don't know. And then normally there's a white wall, a window with some sunlight. You can picture it out, right?
Yeah.
and then really everything is dark. And then there's this ray of light only in the bride, really beautiful. And it's just gorgeous. No matter how many times I see it, I always like, wow, this is gorgeous. But what sometimes I don't see is that like everything works well in terms of lighting, and even sometimes the frame is perfect, but then the emotions in the bride, they just don't connect with what's happening in the frame. So I think the third element is the model, is the subject, right? So directing the subject to get the right mood is also part of the composition. It's part of the story that you want to tell. And you tell the story you want to tell. It doesn't really matter the truth.
Sure.
You tell your truth, right? So you need to explore more. I think especially in the pace that wedding photographers shoot, right? It's hard, I know. But just like slowing down a little bit, kind of taking a step back and kind of looking at the frame and seeing what kind of mood I'm looking at, like, and what do I want to show? Just like a beautiful bride and a beautiful light and a beautiful place, or is there something more? So then you transform composition in something that is like unique.
That's a great question to ask at the end of lining up a portrait, for example. It's like, what am I trying to say as I take this image?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think you probably feel that all the time, right? When you and I think there is I know that is it's pretty subjective, but there's a gut feeling, right? When you're shooting something and you know you're missing something, it looks great, but you know there is like something missing, right? You just feel, it's not that you can explain that. You just find, wow, it's great, but it's just not there yet. So you need to kind of question yourself, like, do I kind of just point my camera up a little bit and make the frame a little bit more unique? And then, I don't know, maybe the bride is in a corner, more isolated and more like lonely, kind of like reflective, in that sense, like getting ready for the wedding, or is she really like happy and looking at the lights as the future, like whatever. I'm just kind of like exploring.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's great. I want to jump a bit into some of the gear that maybe you use and a bit of the workflow without going too much into it, because I know you're doing a masterclass in a few weeks actually, which is almost sold out at the experience. But for those listening, could you tell us a bit about the sort of cameras and lenses that you use, and then leading into a bit of your workflow once you've taken the images, what sort of software are you using to edit with?
So I do shoot with a Nikon D750. And I have 3 lenses. I have a 35 millimeters that I barely use. I use only when I'm out for portraits of my family. I have a 50 millimeters that I use sometimes in my shoot, and an 85 millimeters that I use probably 90% of the time for all my shoots. I really like, I don't like the 85 as well for outdoors as I like for indoors.
Okay.
I find 50 more like a kind of a all around lens for outdoors, and 35 as well. But the 85 gives me this kind of like the chance of kind of compressing the image in a way and kind of telling the story in a more like narrow way, kind of showing enough in the frame, right? But not revealing too much as well. So this is basically what I use. I carry a few like reflector with me. I carry also some light blockers, like cloth, some black cardboards that I can sometimes block windows. And I also use like like one of these table plastic cloth that you use for birthday parties. So I carry some black ones so I can kind of block the light whenever I need it. And I edit everything in Lightroom. So basically what I do is I do all the culling and contrast and tone adjustment in Lightroom. When I'm done with it, I export everything in PSD and then I start working on Photoshop. So there's some retouching involved, not a lot of it, but there is some. And then I finish. There's some adjustments sometimes that I need to be done. So I do that in Photoshop as well. So I do like, it's a double process. But because I don't shoot a lot, like wedding photographer, so that kind of works for me for my my workflow.
Beautiful. And can you tell us a bit then about your masterclasses, and for anybody who's interested in going to your workshop in a few weeks, what they can expect? And also, having said that, obviously I think there's only one ticket left, right? Is that correct?
I think so. You're the one managing it, so. But I think so.
There's literally one ticket left, and so if they can't go to that workshop and it is sold out by the time this airs, then what is a good way for them to get in touch with you?
Well, I do workshops every time people ask me to go to different cities for workshops. So I love, like, education has been part of my life since I started doing the Diaries Project. And it's been part of my main business, education. So workshops, I travel quite often for workshops. And also conferences. Whenever there is people ask me, "Hey, João, can you come to El Paso, Texas?" There was a guy asking me to go to El Paso in Texas, and I said, as long as there is people interested, yeah, of course, I'll be anywhere. Also, I do one-on-one workshops whenever people want to. So there's I've done a few in Vancouver where people flew or drove here to do one-on-one workshops with me. And and I'm always around. So for now, this is my only workshop that I'm doing. I might do one next year in San Francisco. I'm not sure yet. And I'm planning a few others, but probably in Europe and other places. Yeah. But
fantastic. And what can one learn at your workshops? What is the experience that they would have?
So my workshops is literally, I talk about entirely my creative process, from my creative thought, what is behind the work that I do, what motivates me, from art direction, pre-production, production, shooting, and editing. So it's my full process. I leave nothing I try to leave nothing out. Like as long as people ask me, I will answer any question. So it's a really cool, very intense workshop, and I've been doing this for like almost 5 years, and it's kind of a very round up workshop, and people have the opportunity to shoot for like this workshop in Vancouver, which is a 1-day workshop. We'll probably be shooting for around 4 to 5 hours. So everybody has a chance to shoot, practice, see me shooting as well, see how I build every scene from scratch, so they can see in real life how I work, from like art direction, talking to model, prepping the model for the shoot, until like shooting and editing. Yeah.
And so you're creating every scene from scratch with the attendees and the model in mind?
Oh, yeah. Like literally shoot exactly the way I shoot throughout my session. And just the difference is that I stop every minute to kind of explain what I'm doing and while I'm doing. And so they understand
Fantastic.
The purpose of why am I doing this or not that, and doing that and not this. So, yeah.
Great. And so your presentation, The Light Diaries, is going to be going into a bit more about your passion for movies and your career within the advertising photography, and then leading into personal work. And could you tell us a bit more about your presentation and what the attendees can look forward to expecting in a few weeks?
So I've been thinking about my presentation for a while, right? And I spoke with a few friends, and I asked them, what would you want to, really close friends who saw my process developing and the diaries being created, and people who was there in that time. And I always I asked them, if you were in the audience, what would you be interested in hearing? And all of them said, talk about the view of this world, and also how we create those scenes, and what do they mean to you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to go a lot into it, but I'm going to talk a little about my history, the Diaries project, what is my thought process, and what does it mean to me being a male photographer in a boudoir world, and how I approach this kind of photography, and how much personal work means to me. Other than other stuff as well.
Great. That's great. And you've been at the experience, this will be your third time attending. I actually met you randomly in a night. Hugh Whitaker introduced me to your work and to yourself, and I'm honored to call you a friend, and I'm so glad that you're presenting at ARC this year. But you did a mini presentation in year one, and last year you were part of the team actually in helping us get everything organized. Can you tell us a bit about some of your highlights and experiences at ARC for anyone who hasn't attended before?
Oh yeah, there's so many good things to talk about ARC, and you know that it's genuine. It's not because I'm your friend, but I really ARC for me is this really unique conference that embraces everything that makes any conference that would make any conference really amazing. So it's a very diverse conference. The audience, the level of the audience is really, really high. So all photographers are amazing photographers attending, and the speakers, the lineup is always really diverse, which is such a kind of a breath of fresh air if you go to other conferences where there's always always wedding photographers, or always only one kind of category of photographers, right? So it's so good to see family photographers, commercial photographers, and ARC is amazing. So the past 2 years for me, I learned a lot, really learned a lot. Always left ARC truly inspired. I met so many amazing photographers from Vancouver and from other cities. The parties are crazy in a good way. Last year was really, really fun. And I think it is it has the perfect balance of socializing, education, having fun, knowing the city, with curling and walking around, photo shoots, photo hangouts. So I think ARC is just this perfect community, right? Really. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, I'm guessing, but I'm pretty sure that the amount of people who is returning from the previous years it's pretty high. Yeah, because the conference is amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, John. And any highlights that really stick out from you, a takeaway from listening to one of the past presenters, or an activity that you took part in that you really enjoyed?
So last year, which is fresher in my mind, I remember Jennifer's talk which was just so funny and like kind of so natural. It said a lot about her and kind of like explained so much about how she sees the world. Ferris talk was just inspiring, truly inspiring. He's the most humble, talented photographer I know. Who else? I remember the mini presentations were amazing. Like the fast-paced talks were also great. I was going through my presentation and remembering the fast-paced presentation from Hugh. He was talking about like personal work, and he presented it in such a simple way, man, how he sees light and how kind of like he just started noticing things in his work, and then he started pursuing those, lately in his life. So it was really inspiring. And I still have so many things in my mind that I learned from Mark.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, João. And I'm so glad that Hugh was the fast-paced presenter, like the attendee presentation in year one, and you were a mini presentation speaker in year one, and you're both back as keynotes this year, and I'm absolutely honored that you both are coming back and teaching and being a part of this wonderful community in Vancouver.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited to be there. Like, I'm so honored, and I can't wait for ARC. And I think everybody's so excited, to be there, really. And I can't wait to see everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, João. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to hearing your presentation and seeing you on the dance floor at ARC.
Oh, man, the dance floor. Okay. Can't guarantee that.
Well, how about karaoke? We have the live karaoke night. Are you going to be singing one of your Brazilian classic tunes, or maybe something?
You never know. But maybe I saw you talking about like a lip sync battle.
Yeah.
So that might be my stuff as well, man. So
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Well, after the karaoke, we're thinking about doing a lip sync battle. So that could be pretty fun. I think 99.9% we're going to be doing that. So let us know which track you'll be doing, and we'll make that happen.
I will, man, for sure.
Beautiful, João. Thank you again for your time, and I'll see you in a few weeks. Well, how was that, guys? I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And if you're coming to the experience in a few weeks, then you're in for a treat. To learn more about João, he can be found at joamguedes.com. And I'd really love to hear about what you thought about this conversation, what inspired you, which movies are you going to be watching, how will you be looking at them differently from now on, will you be storyboarding your next shoot? Join the conversation. Use the hashtag the ARC Creative Podcast and tweet us or Instagram us at ArcThisIs. I'd really love to hear from you, and let's get a conversation going, and we look forward to catching you again next week for another episode of the ARC Creative Podcast. Hugs and high fives. Peace.